My name is Brad McAuliffe. I am the editor-in-chief of Law and Human Behavior, and I'm excited to welcome you to this event. Dr. Wilford's going to be talking about some research and methodology that we had the pleasure of publishing recently in Law and Human Behavior. And so what I would like to do before I turn it over is just give a brief introduction. And this is our first time, so bear with us in terms of if there are any technological glitches, but we are excited to do it and hope this will be one of many more in the future. So thanks for coming and being a part of this. Dr. Wilford's an associate professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Her research aims to improve real-world policies and procedures, particularly in legal and educational domains. She earned her PhD at Iowa State as a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow under Gary Wells and Jason Chan. In 2019, the National Science Foundation's Law and Science Division awarded Dr. Wilford a 5-year career grant to study plea decision-making, which helped fund the development of the simulation you're about to learn about. And she recently received in 2020 a supplement award to create the researcher console she'll be showcasing today. Dr. Wilford's work has been published in a number of high-impact peer-reviewed journals, including Law and Human Behavior, Psychology, Public Policy and Law, Psych Science, and the Journal of Experimental Psychology Applied. She has a blog with Psychology Today called The Injustice System, and her research program earned her recognition as an Association for Psychological Science Rising Star in 2020. We are super excited to have Dr. Wilford joining us today and really appreciate her valuable time and insight. So please join me in a loud virtual round of applause to welcome her.
All right, thank you very much, Brad, for that introduction. And thank you to everyone here for making the time on a Friday afternoon. I know it's not ideal, but we assumed it would also be less ideal to have scheduling conflicts on Fridays. So thank you for choosing to spend some of your pre-weekend time with us. So I'm very excited to share this new simulation platform with a group of interested scholars. And I want to thank both Law and Human Behavior as well as the American Psychology Law Society for providing us with this opportunity and disseminating the details of this event. I also want to thank everyone who's already started using the simulation for their own research and those who've served in an advisory capacity during its development, some of whom are here today. I also want to mention that today's event is being recorded to share with those who are unable to attend. So just to let everyone know that. The development of this platform actually began in 2016 when I was introduced to the person whose contributions were absolutely critical to the realization of its creation. And he's thankfully here today, Misha Rabinovich. Could you say hello, Misha?
Hi, everybody. So great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So if you're asking yourself how someone who's been formally educated in psychology could possibly create a computer simulation, the answer to your question is Misha. He is an associate professor of interactive media at the University of Massachusetts Lowell and is an artist and educator who, along with his partner, Caitlin Foley, co-founded the artist duo Caitlin and Misha. They are recipients of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Immersive Scholar Award and have exhibited at such venues as the Science Gallery in London, the New Museum's Ideas City Festival in New York City, and the Torrance Art Museum in Los Angeles. They were actually recently commissioned by King's College in Cambridge to design and run a series of workshops and produce an animation about an experimental fecal microbiota transplantation medical trial that will be screened at the UK Parliament in November. So Misha will actually be showcasing some of his expertise later in this session when we provide a brief overview of how you can contribute new animation assets to this simulation. So when we designed this platform, we really had sort of two primary goals in mind. The first was to create a flexible research paradigm that would be available to all interested researchers and could provide participants with a more immersive experience than vignettes or narratives. And the second objective was really to create a broader community of plea researchers who could connect via this shared resource. Because when I started this research in 2016, I really felt like there needed to be more people doing research on pleas, given that the vast majority of adjudications are resolved via plea negotiations and guilty pleas. So in accordance with both these goals, we created a researcher console to increase the accessibility of the simulation, such that researchers would be able to customize their own versions of the simulation without any programming experience. So the successful completion of this console is greatly attributable to our former senior programmer, Michael Pascal. Could you say hello, Michael?
Hey, everyone.
So Michael led a team of programmers in the expansion of the simulation and the creation of the researcher console in the summer of 2020. He also provided guidance to the team that created a new educational extension to the simulation over this last summer in 2021. He graduated from the University of Massachusetts Lowell in 2020 with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. But since then, he's really been focusing on his interests in cognitive and clinical psychology. So with the graduate student at the University of New Hampshire, Michael implemented the cyberball paradigm to investigate the effects of social exclusion on task-unrelated thought. He's currently employed at the MGH Center for Addiction Medicine, where he works with data from a past neuroimaging study regarding THC intoxication in the frontal lobe. And he plans to apply for psychology graduate programs next fall. So for those of you who are involved in psychology graduate programs, I wish you luck in landing Michael Pascal as your graduate student. He is fantastic. So Michael will also be showcasing some of his expertise as part of this session to provide an overview of how you can integrate the simulation with Qualtrics to connect it with a survey. All right, so before we get started, I just want to encourage everyone to ask questions as they arise by submitting them in the chat. Given the number of participants we have, I don't want to try and catch raised hands because I'm just not that good at multitasking. So Misha and I will be taking turns keeping an eye on the chat to make sure that we're addressing the questions as efficiently as possible. But in addition, at the end of this session, we've all agreed to sort of hang around for as much time as is needed to answer any lingering questions there might be. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing. Okay, can everyone see this web page?
Yes.
Excellent. So the first thing I want to show everyone is this page. This is the Plea Justice webpage. You can get to this site by going to pleajustice.org. This page provides an overview of the simulation and its assets. So if you look, this is the home page, and you can see a nice description of the features the simulation offers, as well as examples of the assets that are part of the simulation. It also provides a number of resources to assist you in adapting it for your own research. So if you look at this left navigation panel, you'll see there are sections showing you how to configure a study, how to connect a simulation to Qualtrics. There's also a section that explains all the features that are available in the researcher console here. So the console quick reference. The final link provides internal documentation for people who are particularly technologically inclined, I guess, and interested in learning more about how to potentially program additional features or add animation assets, which again are other things that we'll also be talking about. And then I almost neglected to mention, we also have housed on this site examples of previous simulation scripts so that you can sort of get a starting base for starting a script for your own simulation. So you can click on any of these links to actually view examples of scripts that have been used for previous simulation studies. Okay. And then if you look at the top of this page, you'll notice 3 links here. One is a live demo of the simulation, a link to the researcher console, which I'll be showing you shortly, and finally a link to the Plea Justice repository on GitHub. If you have no idea what GitHub is, that's totally fine. Again, we've designed this simulation such that you don't need to have any knowledgeability of these sorts of programming hubs. But if, again, you're sort of a technologically inclined person, you're absolutely welcome to check out our GitHub repository, which includes a number of the coding updates and different versions of the coding that have gotten us to the current point. So this demo link will, as I mentioned, take you to a demo of the simulation. And specifically, this actually provides a demo of the study that we just published in Law on Human Behavior, which represents phase 1 of the research project that was funded by the National Science Foundation. So clicking on this link, you can see there are a number of different parameters you can submit. So you can actually enter a participant name if you'd like. So you can enter your own name, for instance. And then over here, you actually see a panel of all the different conditions that were included in the study. And then that essentially allows you to specify which condition you'd like to demo. So here you can see, okay, if I want to demo an innocent condition where they were offered a plea sentence of 18 months and had an 80% probability of conviction, then I would just enter experimental condition 9 here, and I could demo that. And then I'll go over these other features when we get to the researcher console. So that's the demo link. And then again, if you click on this link will actually take you to our researcher console, which I want to spend some time exploring. So the first thing you should do if you're new to this tool is, of course, to create an account. We've made this process as painless as possible. All you have to do is submit your first name, email address, profession, your institutional affiliation, and then create a username and a password. Okay. Once you've created those parameters, you can then of course use them to log in. So we'll go here now. We're going to go ahead and log in now. All right. So the first thing I'm going to bring your attention to is this assets page. So right now you're going to see, because this is a brand new account, that I have no assets on this page. So don't fret. Thankfully, if you go to the shared asset library, this is where we've already created a number of assets that you are free to use within this simulation paradigm. So the first thing I'm going to do, because you can see there are quite a few here, is sort them by type. So you can see we have 4 different types of assets. For the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on background, actor, and clip, because right now we only have one foreground image anyway, and it's just an image of a table that you can insert if you'd like. But if we start by looking at the backgrounds, you can see this shows you all the different background images available for use in the simulation. And you should note that each image is accompanied with a description, as well as 1 to 2 citations, providing you with studies that have actually used this asset. So of course, here you'll notice we have the citation for the Law on Human Behavior article, which utilized all these assets, as well as another paper that we recently published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology Applied, which also used this simulation. So from here, essentially, you can look at the available assets and decide which ones you might want to use for your own customized version of the simulation. And essentially, all you have to do is click on this nice little copy link to copy these assets to your own personal assets. Okay, so those are the backgrounds. Now let's go to the actors. So this shows you all the actors that are available for use in the simulation. Now, I'll point out right now that the default for all these actors, as you might have noticed, is that they're male and Caucasian. And we sadly did that because we felt it was a reflection of the actual demographics for law enforcement actors. However, we are in the testing phase of adding a new feature that would actually allow you to customize these actors. So if you wanted to have female attorneys, if you want your attorneys to appear BIPOC, that will be a customizable feature that we'll be releasing later. But for right now, these are the default appearances of all of the actors. And you can see the actors we have available include a defense attorney, a judge, a prosecutor, and excitedly, we have just added some new assets that have actually not been in a published study yet, so that we could increase the accessibility of the simulation to be used for interrogation scenarios as well. So we've actually added an officer asset. In addition to, you can use this officer with reflection asset if you want that image like they're facing a mirror. So you can use either of these versions of our law enforcement officer as well. So let's copy some of these assets to our account. Okay. And then finally, you can also look at the number of animated clips that we have available. So these clips are actually just what they sound like. They're animated clips that portray some sort of event or some sort of information. And again, I'll bring your attention to these new assets that we have available incorporating interrogation scenarios. So here you can see an asset where someone's actually slid a witness statement, a paper that's clearly labeled witness statement. And then we have a version where you can see the participant's hand signing it in an interrogation condition. And we have another version where you see the person's hands wave, no, I'm not going to sign it, for a no confession condition. So again, we're trying to add new assets to this simulation all the time. And the other thing I'll bring your attention to is, even though these haven't been used in a published study, you'll notice we do still provide a citation for some research that's ongoing that uses this citation. And I'll bring your attention to that because I think this is sort of another cool feature of this simulation. So when a new asset is added and we provide this information about researchers who are using it, it gives you sort of a connection to make with these researchers if you want to find out, well, what are you doing with this asset and what research question are you investigating? I think it opens the door for additional collaborations and just getting more information about who else is involved in this type of research and what type of questions they're interested in answering. So for this asset, again, you can see it hasn't been published yet, but it is being currently used for a study. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus on our larceny assets. And you'll notice too that we have some different versions of some of these assets. And that's because, again, we're sort of constantly thinking of new ways to try and increase the realism of the simulation. And one of the ways we do that is by improving the existing animation assets. So for instance, you'll notice there are 2 versions of the security cam footage, this version and this version. And an obvious update that you can see that we made in this newer version is we added this sort of camera overlay to make it look a little more realistic, like it's actually security camera footage. So what I tried to do in these descriptions is just to make it clear when we've added an updated version of a simulation, I've added that term updated to the description so that you can easily differentiate it as a newer version of that original clip. So we'll go ahead and copy this and this. Okay. I think that's everything I need. All right. So now when we look at my assets page, you'll see all of the assets that I copied are now here and are available for me to use. Okay. Do we have any questions so far, Misha?
Not so far, but feel free, if folks have questions, they can just put them right in the chat there.
Okay, great. All right, so now that we've added assets to our account, we can go to this scenarios page up here. And again, because this is a new account, you'll notice that I have no scenarios yet. So let's say that I just finished reading the Wilford et al. Paper. It's really weird to refer to myself in that way, but let's say I just read that paper in Law and Human Behavior. I thought it was really interesting, and I've thought of different ways I could, slightly modify that study to examine other research questions. So in that case, I do not have to start a simulation from scratch. I can go to the shared scenario library. And here you'll see published scenarios, published simulations for things that have already been published. So basically, if I was interested in just sort of replicating or slightly changing the Shadow of the Trial paper that was just published in Law and Human Behavior, again, all I have to do is click this nice copy icon, and I've copied that scenario to my page. Now I have access to it and can make any modifications that I want to it. And what I think is really great about this feature is I'm sure all of us are aware that replicability has probably never been more important to our field than it is right now. And by having the ability to simply publish scenarios that have been created, obviously we're making replicability as easy as I can imagine it being, right? So if you were interested in replicating the study we just published, all you have to do is go to this page, copy it, and recruit new participants, and you can do an exact replication of the study that we did. So this feature was really important to us, and I'm really glad that it's available for you. So now if I then click back to my scenarios, you can see I now have a copy of this scenario that was in the shared scenario library. Okay. So before I show you this very complex version of a scenario, I want to just show you the process of creating a scenario from scratch. So let's say there's not an existing study that really looks at exactly what you'd like to, so you would just prefer to start from scratch. That's absolutely an option to you as well. So all you have to do in that case is click on this Create New Scenario button. And you just want to create a unique name for your scenario. So of course, for the purposes of today, I'm going to say demo event. And then you can also add any additional descriptors that'll help you to recognize which scenario this is referring to. Okay, and then when you get to the point where you've published a scenario and you want to make it public, you want to add it to that shared scenario library, all you have to do to have this button activated is to email me so that I can give you the access to be able to make scenarios or assets public. Okay. So we're going to save this. And then now all you have to do in order to start playing around with this is to click on it. Okay. And now this is our researcher console. So now you can really start editing this new scenario. And the first thing you're going to want to do is update the options for this scenario. So you'll click on this button and it'll bring you to your available assets. So these are all the assets that you copied from the shared asset library. And basically you're being asked, do you want to use all these assets for this particular scenario? So an easy thing to do if you know, yes, I want all these assets available for this scenario, is just to click this checkbox and then click this little arrow to show that these are all now available for use within this scenario. Okay. So now you can see all of these assets are available. Then the other thing you want to do is go to, I'll show you tags next. So tags essentially refer to your study manipulations. So this essentially tells the simulation and also just provides you sort of notes regarding which conditions you're manipulating for each of these within this particular scenario. So let's say, for instance, guilt status is of course always a popular one. Okay, and then we'll say plea sentence will be another variable. And then you simply tell it what levels of these variables exist. So of course, for guilt status, we probably have innocent and guilty. And for plea sentence, we could have probation and incarceration. Okay, now let's go to settings. So here you can see the name and the description that we already created. And then here in this survey URL box, you essentially can insert a link to a survey that participants are directed to after they've completed the simulation. So typically this is going to be a Qualtrics survey. We chose Qualtrics for a couple of different reasons. One is we felt that many social science researchers have experience designing surveys in Qualtrics, and most universities therefore have licenses to it. In addition, Qualtrics already provides researchers with multiple ways of downloading data files and securing those data files, which was sort of something that we didn't want to have to get into. We didn't want to have to delve into figuring out how to securely store data files. So we said, you know, we're just going to let Qualtrics handle that and just make our simulation software integrate with Qualtrics. So just for the purposes of right now, I'm going to insert the homepage for Qualtrics as a placeholder here. Okay, and then I'm just going to update settings. All right. So we can now start building our simulation. So our previous studies have typically started with a clip of the crime intro. So we're going to start with this larceny intro scene. So this is just a clip sort of setting the context of the crime for which the participant defendant is going to be accused. From there, you could jump straight to a courtroom scene. So we'll say courtroom 1, add. And now here you can see, I should have pointed out here, you have sort of 3 different types of elements you can insert. You can insert a clip, which of course represents those assets that I showed you, where it'll just automatically play an animated clip. You can also add dialogue. And here's where you can really start manipulating a lot of different variables, is via this dialogue. So once you select dialogue, now a number of additional features are added that you can select. So the first question, of course, is who do you want to be speaking? So we'll say, we'll start with the prosecutor. And then for the background, where do you want them to be speaking? So as I mentioned, we're going to start in the courtroom. So we're going to say the prosecutor in the courtroom is going to be talking to the participant defendant. So then here, of course, you just enter the script. So what do you want this person to say? Okay, and the nice feature of this simulation is, again, we were very interested in trying to increase the dynamism and the immersiveness of this simulation. And one of the ways that we did that is by allowing you to incorporate the participant's name within the script. So anytime I put in @you, the simulation will automatically replace that with the participant's name that they submitted as part of the consent process. Okay, so now we can insert an additional scene. So I'm going to create the setting for this accusation. So we're going to continue with our prosecutor in the courtroom and say, and I try to think of the most efficient way to create a cohesive storyline without having to spend too much time on you listening to me type. But yeah, so in addition, we've also created evidence for this crime. So here we're going to insert a clip. This is going to be the security cam footage that I was mentioning before. And importantly, we actually designed the security camera footage to be somewhat ambiguous. So essentially, because of the angle of the camera, it's actually plausible that innocent individuals could have removed these sunglasses immediately before exiting the store. So we wanted to do this so that you could actually keep the evidence consistent and solely manipulate guilt status within the simulation. So you have the option to do that. You can show the security camera footage even if the participant's actually innocent. You then, of course, just want to make sure that you make it clear in the script that this person's in fact innocent, despite the fact that the security camera footage seems to imply that they're guilty. So that's our security cam footage. Then we're going to go to the judge. Okay, so again, we'll go back to dialogue. Now we're going to choose our judge actor. We're still going to be in the courtroom, and the judge is going to say, And here's where you can start trying to, again, sort of increase the participants' interest by kind of flipping actors, keeping some consistent change throughout the experience to keep their attention. We're just going to ignore typos at this point. Okay. And finally, we'll conclude the courtroom with our judge. Okay. Okay, so now we can change settings and actually show the participant avatar in a holding cell. Sorry, so we need dialogue, actor. So this is one of the unique assets because it's selected as an actor, but it actually also has a preset background, and that's because we wanted to create this background but then also make it such that the avatar's features, so however the participant customized the avatar, is automatically represented in this image. So if you select the avatar jail testing actor, you don't have to select a background because that's already built in.
We have a question about how many sentences per scene, because the example is showing one, but you can have more text.
Correct. So if you'll notice while I'm typing, see these little numbers down here, essentially you're limited to up to 220 characters based on just the amount of space that we have in the text box. So this will nicely show you if you're running up against that limit and potentially need to break it up into a couple of different text boxes. That's a great question. Any others? Okay. So now we're going to insert our nice little flashback. So here's where we actually manipulate guilt status. So we're going to show a clip, and this is going to be the larceny flashback. And of course, here you can decide, do you want them to actually be guilty or do you want them to actually be innocent? So for this first one, we'll select innocent. And essentially in the innocent version, what happens is the person flashes back to the day of the incident and they recall putting the glasses down immediately before exiting the store. So then, of course, reflecting on that, we have them say something to the effect of, again, to make this assignment to innocence clear. Okay. Okay, so now we can change scenes again, and we can introduce them to their defense attorney. So now we're choosing the defense attorney actor. We're choosing the meeting room background. And here's where we do sometimes have people use that table foreground if they just want a neutral object in the room. And then here's where we're going to manipulate the plea sentence. All right, this will be our last from the defense attorney. Okay, and then here we can actually capture their decision within the simulation. So you actually have the option of asking questions through the simulation. So you can insert a background and we'll say your question is, do you want to accept this plea offer? I will say just one limitation of this feature, and again, another reason why we've integrated it with Qualtrics is so that you can ask more complex survey questions, but the possible responses have to be limited to one word. So you could say yes or no. And then here you're essentially telling it when this data point is exported to Qualtrics, what do you want the name of this variable to be in your Qualtrics data file? So we could say plea outcome. All right. Okay, so now is a good time to save. Now that we've finished one condition, all right. And then now that we've finished one condition, as you might recall, we've decided this was going to be a 2x2. So now we can go to this nice little settings tag and we can go to variable tags, and now we can tell the simulation which variables were manipulated for this condition. So as you recall, or might recall, the guilt status was innocent and the plea sentence was probation. Okay, and the nice thing too is these tags will now float. So even if I scroll down to the bottom of this, if I forget, oh, what conditions were represented here again, I can just look up here and say, okay, this is innocent, probation, okay? I also just want to bring your attention to this customize assets feature. So this is where you would be able to theoretically customize features of the actors. So if you wanted to make a female attorney or a female judge or change the skin tone of one of the actors, you'll be able to do that here. We'll say within the next few months. Okay, so we're going to be testing that feature soon and we'll be making it available as soon as it's ready. All right, so we've finished one condition. So of course, now we are interested in adding conditions. So up here, just click the add condition button. And what you'll see is that this new condition is an automatic copy of condition 1, which of course is nice because as experimentalists, we obviously want to keep as much consistent across conditions as possible. So the default anytime you create a new condition is to copy the previous condition, okay? So now what you can do is say, all right, so which variables do I want to be represented in this new condition? So I go to settings, variable tags, and we'll say, now I want to make this person guilty and then keep the plea sentences probation. Okay, so now I can see the tags here are guilty and probation. So I just have to look for, well, where did I manipulate guilt status? And if you do this convention, which I would recommend, this naming convention where you name the asset according to what you manipulated, you can just go down here and say, okay, here's where I manipulated guilt status. And what you do is you click this little icon, excuse me, which essentially severs the link between this box and this box, because right now it's bound to condition 1, which essentially means that any changes you make here are automatically made here. And the reason that's really nice is, let's say I realize, oh, you know, I made a bunch of typos here, for instance, and I need to fix them. When I fix them here, the changes are automatically also reflected to any of the conditions that are bound to that square. So if you have like an 8-condition study and decide you need to make a minor change to the script, you only have to change the original condition and all the others will update to reflect that change. All right, so now let's go to our guilt manipulation. So this we want to unbind because we want this to be different than condition 1. So here we can select the guilty flashback rather than the innocent flashback. And then we can also unbind this part where they reflect on the fact that they're innocent and change it to reflecting on the fact that they're guilty. So we can say something like, I accidentally forgot to take the sunglasses off before I left. I was afraid to take them back because I thought they'd think I did it on purpose. I guess I'm guilty. Okay. All right. So now we've created 2 conditions. We have one condition reflecting an innocent person who was offered a plea sentence of probation, and another condition where the person's guilty and was also offered a probation sentence. So now let's throw in our additional 2 conditions. Okay. So now we have conditions 3 and 4. So we go back to the variable tags. We're going to make this person innocent, but now we're going to offer them an incarceral plea sentence. And then up here, we're going to make this person guilty. and also offer them an incarceral sentence. And now you can see by looking up here, a quick scan tells you that we have all of the different combinations of conditions represented. So now, of course, we just have to make sure that our binding is accurately reflecting these tags. So go back down to guilt manipulation, which is here. So here we can see we have accurate reflecting here, as well as for this one, but not for this one. Okay, so then what you can do is you can click on this bind button. Oh, actually, sorry. First, what you want to do is you want to unbind these because you want to bind them to the appropriate parent conditions. So now we can select this bind button. And the first thing you do is you select the parent scene. So what's the scene that's going to determine the content of the other scenes? So what's sort of going to be the boss scene? Okay, so we'll say condition 1 is going to determine what should be in condition 3. Okay, and then you can select done. And now these two are bound together. And then you want to do the same right here where you have the reflecting on the guilt manipulation. Select that and then, ooh, sorry, I forgot to unbind these first. Bind. And you'll notice an additional nice feature is the ones that I have the option of binding it to are automatically highlighted. So you can see which ones it would potentially make sense for me to bind this box to. Okay. So now all of my innocent conditions are bound together for the guilt status manipulation. So now I want to do that for the guilty condition. So this is the parent of the guilty conditions. And then again, guilty, guilty. Done. Okay, so now I'm going to go down to my plea sentence manipulation. Wow, this is rife with typos. Okay, and then here again, I can unbind these and then bind them appropriately based on the conditions. So here I want these two to be bound together because they're both probation conditions. But now I want to change this one to sentence of 6 months in jail to an incarceral offer. And now I can bind this one to that one and it automatically changes when I hit done. Okay. All right, any questions about the bind feature? All right, so I will say for the sake of time, I made a relatively simple study. It's a 2x2, but when we talk about, for instance, the study we published in Law and Human Behavior, which had 16 different conditions, then this bind feature really comes in handy for that guilt status manipulation where you need to bind 7 others to innocent and 7 others to guilty. It's a really handy feature to have. And now I can hear my toddler. Okay, good.
You can imagine the complexity of this really exploding. And that's where the bind feature is very useful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll actually show you that scenario that we copied just to give you sort of a taste of how complex this can get. So just to give you sort of a taste of these other features up here. So you can also use this swap feature. And essentially what this does is, as you can kind of guess, is you can change things around temporally. So if you realize, oh, this piece of script should go before this script, you can just switch the order of those things. So swap's going to be limited to boxes within the same condition. And then you're also only able to do it with things that aren't bound to other things. Okay, so we're going to nix that for right now. And then of course, copy is relatively straightforward, right? This allows you to select a box that you then want to copy to another box. Okay. All right, so now we're going to save this and I'm going to show you the preview function. Okay, so now you've completed a draft of your experiment and you want to actually make sure it works. So this is your preview of the simulation you just created. So again, I'm going to pick on Brad for the participant's name. And then I can decide which experimental condition I want to test. So do I want to test innocent probation, guilty probation, or do I even just want to randomly assign myself to a condition? So I'm going to select random assignment. And then I can also test the avatar customization feature. Or if I already know that that works, then I can keep that box unchecked and not have to waste my time repeatedly going through the avatar customization phase. But for the purposes of today's demo, we'll have a look at that. And then this is kind of a cool feature that was added during some of our focus groups. So essentially what this feature allows you to do is, we all know the process of perfecting a study can take much trial and error. So when you've gotten to the point where you're absolutely sick of watching these animated clips over and over and over again, if you click this box, it will show all the animations at twice speed, which is, in addition to being hilarious, saves some of your valuable time. Okay, so I'll actually click that box for the purpose of this demo, just so you can see what this looks like at 2 times speed. Okay, so then we can select Start Simulation. Okay, and we're starting with the avatar customization stage. So the first phase is to select a figure for your avatar. And then we have a number of different eye shapes you can select, a number of different hairstyles. Then you can select a hair color. So we have a palette to give you some sort of starting values. Select an eye color, skin color, and an outfit color. And then again, we are working on making all these same features customizable for the existing actors as well. Okay, so now we'll say we're done. So we're probably going to get a little error message for the speed testing, but that's fine. You can just select OK and get past it. Yep, there it is. So just select OK and it'll go. So this is 2 times speed. Does not go this fast naturally, but it makes testing a lot faster. Okay, and then of course here you can decide, do you want to accept the plea offer or not? And then it'll automatically redirect you to that link that you inserted, which again for us was just the homepage for Qualtrics, but for you could be a link to a specific survey. All right, so now we're going to close this, go back to our simulation. Okay, so now let's say you've previewed it, you're happy with where it is. So now, of course, you have the option to publish. And this allows you to download the simulation, which you can either host on your own site, or if you're interested in using our server, then again, you just have to contact me and I can give you access to downloading for immediate distribution. Which will then provide you with a couple of different activation links. One for, again, if you want to allow your participants to engage in avatar customization, and another if you don't. Okay. Now I'm going to, again, give you a taste of how complex this can get. So here's the shadow of the trial scenario. So this is just one of the 2 scenarios we used for this study. We used actually both the hit and run and the theft scenarios, but this is just giving you a taste of what the hit and run one looked like. So again, here we had 16 conditions. I'm sorry, 18 conditions. Yes, I can't do math today. So it was a 2 by 3 by 3, which gets you to 18 different conditions. So now again, you can see here where binding really comes in handy when you get to the cells where we manipulated some of these conditions. So scrolling down. All right, so here's, for instance, where we manipulated innocence and guilt. So here you can see all of these odd numbered conditions are bound to condition 1. So I was able to select that binding feature and select this is the parent, and then select every other condition to bind to that one. And then if we look at the plea discount manipulation, you can also see where binding comes in handy. Here's the probability discount, yeah. So it's a nice feature to have. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing and just see if anyone has any questions about using the researcher console before we move on to the next phase, which is to show you how to integrate a scenario with Qualtrics. All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and toss it to Michael to cover how you can integrate your now completed simulation with Qualtrics.
Is there a time limit to advance to the next screen for participants? We don't currently have that.
Sorry, say that again.
Is there a time limit to advance to the next screen for participants?
That's interesting. So within the simulation, we don't have a time limit on that, but I can say for the studies that we've run so far, we haven't had an issue with participants taking, I guess, excessively long on particular text boxes. In fact, our bigger concern was that they would try and breeze through things, which is why, as you may have noticed, it's animated such that the text only comes up at a reasonable speed, and then the arrow to proceed doesn't appear until after all the text has appeared. So I guess that was our bigger concern, was having participants try and skip through really quickly. We didn't consider participants trying to linger on particular text boxes too long. But I'd be interested in whoever asked that question, what your specific concern is. And then that's definitely something we could try and consider in the future.
It was me, Miko. It's not really a concern. I was just wondering, like, I've just noticed with Zoom teaching and doing the different stuff now that students will check out and go make a sandwich and, you know, watch a little TV and then come back. So I was just wondering if after a certain point it defaults to the next screen, or you get a notice, or if it collects data on how long, if somebody does something like that, if it has, you know, timing data, so you would be able to know, okay, well, this person looks like they were gone for an hour before they resumed. And you know, again, it's not a concern or a problem, but I just was wondering if the simulation tracks that, or if, you know, if someone used it, they'd have access to that data.
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe, Michael, do we record time spent within the simulation?
Yeah, so that's actually recorded, and I'll talk about this more in depth in a few minutes, but that's actually recorded by Qualtrics. So usually the way our studies are structured is it starts with a Qualtrics survey. So people are coming from prolific academics, some online site, or they might be directed there by research staff. Qualtrics directs them to the simulation after recording the time that they started. And when they go back to Qualtrics at the end, we have the timestamp of when they returned to the survey. And so we do have that elapsed time. You can look at it that way.
That's right. So yes, typically participants see the informed consent through Qualtrics. So they actually start on Qualtrics and then they're directed to the simulation and then redirected back to that Qualtrics survey after completing the simulation. So you could, if you were concerned about this, use as an exclusionary criterion, if you're recruiting participants through MTurk or Prolific, or even through a student sample, you could say, if we notice that you take longer than an hour completing the simulation, then your data will automatically be excluded and you won't be compensated, because you will be given that data in the output file from Qualtrics. Great. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and toss it to Michael to talk more about syncing the simulation with Qualtrics.
Yeah, let me just pull up my screen. Oh. Okay, so if you go to pleadjustice.org and you go to, in the left sidebar, connecting to Qualtrics, we have an explanation here that goes in depth on how to set up your survey, how to set up the survey flow. If you haven't worked with Qualtrics before, it's fairly common in at least cognitive online studies. And it's pretty much your standard survey platform. However, what it does provide is the ability to do complex branching logic in your surveys. So basically switching the content of the survey based on some variables that are either randomly determined or input by the researcher. It can also record these variables in the data file that it eventually outputs, a CSV file, which you can download. And in designing the simulation, we sort of to leverage the features that are part of Qualtrics. You can use other survey platforms, but Qualtrics is preferred because of the fact that it enables these variables. And actually, we use Qualtrics to control the experimental condition in the simulation, and we can use it to pass in things such as the participant's name, their age, pretty much anything that you could collect from them in a survey can be passed into the simulation. and then presented to the participant as text. So again, this is the link where you can kind of learn more about this. Generally, studies are going to proceed such that participants will be directed on their own computer to a Qualtrics survey, which will ask them for their informed consent, and we'll ask them maybe some basic demographic questions and pre-simulation questions. Then they'll be redirected from Qualtrics to the simulation, where they can view the simulation, answer any questions that are within the simulation. And finally, the simulation will redirect them back to Qualtrics. And that's where the data will be saved, and you can ask further follow-up questions based on the participant's experience. It is possible to do more complicated structurings. I won't go into that today, but just know that it is something that is available to you. So if I open up Qualtrics. So here I've put together basically a demo for us. And if I go to the survey, we can see I've added a few just sort of outline questions. So, there's this first question where you would ask for their informed consent, and you collect their name in a box. And you ask questions about demographic data, and then you give them a prompt that says, hey, you're going to be redirected to a simulated scenario. When you come back, we'll ask you some more questions. And then finally, there's a separate question block where you could insert a post-simulation question. So things that people answer when they return from the simulation to Qualtrics. Now, so this is just a basic survey. The thing here is, though, they're going to view this survey twice. So they'll get a link, some anonymous survey link to a Qualtrics survey. They'll be redirected to the simulation, and the simulation will actually send them back to that very same survey. And so because they're viewing this survey more than once, we're going to use the features of Qualtrics' branching logic to determine how many times they've seen the survey, and also and thereby what questions should we show them? Should we show them the pre-simulation survey? Are they here for the first time? Or should we show them the post-simulation survey? Are they here for the second time? And all the while we're collecting the variables that are necessary. It is also possible to structure this as two separate Qualtrics surveys if you wish. So,
Michael, sorry, I'm just going to pause you really quick. Kelsey asked a question about knowing which conditions they were assigned to. So Kelsey, I'll just bring your attention to the embedded data. Oh, Michael, you want to go back?
Oh, yeah.
So yes, essentially the embedded data. So what happens is you're essentially telling Qualtrics to carry over the data from the simulation regarding what condition they were in. So then when you download the data file, you'll see those conditions represented. I believe they tend to appear at the very end of your data file. So you just scroll all the way to the right and you'll see that embedded data. And then I also want to address, Renee asked a question regarding whether we could record how long they take to make their decision. And unfortunately, we can't do that because that all occurs within the simulation. But if you're really interested in how long they take, what you could do instead is, instead of asking them a question within the simulation, after they're provided the offer, you could just immediately redirect them to Qualtrics. And then of course, Qualtrics has the capability to assess how long they spend on any particular measure.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, and something which we might considering adding in the future. That's a fairly easy, just recording the time is a fairly easy thing to add. But as Miko mentioned, Qualtrics has this idea of embedded data, which is variables that you can kind of pull in from external websites, or that you can kind of use in the background of your survey flow. And so in this case, we've set up a few different embedded data variables. One for the number of views, meaning the number of times that the participant has seen this Qualtrics survey. One for the experimental condition. One for some ID. So this is your participant ID that is assigned, or it can be assigned randomly by Qualtrics, where we use this to track the responses between those two different survey responses that we'll end up getting. So there'll be the first survey response, there'll be the second survey response with the data that came from the simulation. So if I just scroll down, we can see if there are no views, this is the first time the person has seen the simulation, the survey. Then we're going to show them the pre-survey questions, pre-simulation questions, informed consent, etc. And then we're going to randomly assign them to an experimental condition. So this is Qualtrics's means of assigning variables, you basically use the set embedded data element, and then you can set them equal to some code. And so if you're not familiar with Qualtrics, this is something where you can actually, if you want to, you can click and there's a little drop down and it can generate these codes for you. So you can put in a random number, for instance, of 1 to 2 for the number of experimental conditions, 1 to 4 in our case for the number of experimental conditions, etc. Then finally, you put in an end of survey block. Now Qualtrics uses this end of survey block. Basically, it's usually a message that says, hey, thank you for taking the survey. You may now close the browser. In our case, we press this customize button. When you press the customize button, you have the option to, instead of using the default end of survey message, you can redirect to a URL. And so when they reach the end of this first part of the survey, we're going to send them to the simulation. And I'll show you where you get this link in a moment. But basically, it's a pleadjustice.org simulation. And if you note at the end, we've added a few more things to this URL. What this area is called a query string. But basically, you just use the same embedded data codes that Qualtrics uses, and you add this information to the end of the query string, and that sends information into the simulation. So for instance, you can see here we send the name equals Qualtrics field name. So this will send the name of the participant to the simulation so that when you use the @u or @name tag within the simulation, the participant's name will show up. And we send in the other things. We send in their ID. We send in the experimental condition, most importantly. So that's the end of survey block. Later on, they'll return to this survey after they've completed the simulation. So that's when view is equal to 1. They've been here one time already. And you can put in whatever questions you want here too, and just a normal end of survey block that, or maybe you're redirecting them back to Prolific Academic or some other site where you're doing participant recruitment. So that's the survey flow. We have examples of this both on the website and available to either share with you or download if you so desire. But first I'll show you where you kind of link Qualtrics and the simulation. So remember, the simulation, when it's done, has to go back to Qualtrics. So you go under the distributions tab and you get your, yeah, that's fine. You get your anonymous survey link. So we'll grab this link and then we'll go over to our scenario. And if you go in the options menu, you can see there's this survey URL, and I've already pasted it here. But this is the URL of the survey that participants will come from and then go to after the simulation. Similarly, once the scenario has been put together and it's ready to go, you go to this publish menu. And if you've requested access from Dr. Wilford, you can click publish for immediate distribution. And when you do that, this new active simulation link will appear, where you get 2 links where you can use these to send participants to the simulation. This is a permanent link that will always be online as long as your simulation exists on the pleadjustice.org server. So we have 2 versions of the link. One of them allows the participant to customize their avatar. One of them doesn't. Usually you're going to want to use the first, the avatar customization link. The only time you would use the second one is if you're doing a more complicated study where you go back and forth between Qualtrics and the simulation multiple times. Again, that's discussed in the documentation. But we'll copy this link. And this is the link that we paste into our Qualtrics survey. We go to the survey, we go to the survey flow, we go to the end of survey block, and we paste it in here. And again, if you need help with the codes, Qualtrics has plenty of documentation on this, and it's all documented how to input these codes on the Plead Justice website. So that's how you link them together. Now let's actually look at this scenario and see what we can use regarding Qualtrics and how Qualtrics sends data, how the simulation sends data back to Qualtrics. So we noted before that in the URL, Qualtrics sent in the name of the participant. And so if we are in our scenario, anywhere in the script, we can insert the tag @name:, and it will insert the name of the participant here. So if we scroll down, and you can actually do this with any variable. So if you collected the participant's age, if you just assigned a random number in Qualtrics, you can send all of those into the simulation the same way. You just add them to the end of the URL with a little equals notation, and then you can insert them the same way. So if I had a variable called age, I could do @age. Scrolling down, the participant's ID is also shown as an embedded data variable, and it's sent through the URL in exactly the same way. So we can insert the ID of the participant as @link_ID. Then lastly, we have this question type. And so remember, this is multiple choice questions, and I just have to move the Zoom bar out of my way here. You can see here, we've asked a question and we've assigned it to a variable called demo question. This will correspond to the embedded data variable in Qualtrics. So if I go to Qualtrics and I go up to the top, I'm going to want to add a field called demo question. And now when the person comes back to Qualtrics from the simulation, that demo question variable will be saved. And you can see I've just put in some examples: yes, no, maybe, sometimes. These will all be coded as 1, 2, 3, 4. And so you'll see that when we get this demo question variable back in Qualtrics, we'll have a set of either 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on what the participant selected. So say we've now published this, we can go and view the simulation. Well, actually, I won't view the simulation here because we will go to Qualtrics. And I'll just open this in a private tab because I've filled it out a few times already. So this is us as the participant. We're at Qualtrics, we're taking a survey. It's going to ask us some questions. Here I've just obviously made it a template, but let's see, we put in our name. My name's Michael, so Michael. And it says go to the simulated scenario. So I click next, and it redirects us to the avatar customizer in our scenario. So you can see up here, up in the URL, we have live.pleadjustice.org, and it sent us to experimental condition number 1, which I randomly assigned in Qualtrics with the embedded data. It knows my name is Michael. It knows that we viewed the survey 1 time and that my participant ID is 7916. All of this data will be sent back to Qualtrics at the end. But for now, let's continue on through the simulation. So I'm going to customize my avatar. I'm not actually going to do this here, but you can change all of the attributes of your avatar, or the participant's avatar rather. And I'm sent into the simulation. So you can see it inserted my name. In this example, Michael was passed into the simulation, and that's the name up here. So we have ampersand Michael, ampersand name equals Michael, and that got inserted down here. We click next, and it also inserted my participant ID. Again, you can use this for any dynamic information you want to insert. It could even be a multiple sentence thing. So you could dynamically change these from Qualtrics for more advanced variable manipulations. And we'll continue. And remember, this question was marked demo question. The variable was marked demo question in the simulation. And so when we go back to Qualtrics, whatever I click here is going to be saved, coded as a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So in this case, let's pick maybe. And here we are back at Qualtrics. If I go to the URL, you can see that it added all of this information about not only the link ID, the condition, etc., but the simulation added information about what color the individual selected for the hair color, eye color, skin color of their avatar. We have their gender, we have the different customizations that we made. And then at the very end, we also have saved to Qualtrics the variable, the demo question that we had. So our question was yes, no, maybe, sometimes. I clicked maybe, that was the third option. And so we see demo question equals 3. Now what we'll see is in our Qualtrics data file, there will be a column called demo question, and the response to it will be 3 in the CSV file. So in theory, you'd have questions here. We click done, and it says, we thank you for your time. Everything's been completed. So that's how they're linked. Again, all of this is documented on pleadjustice.org. And also, when you're in the scenario editor in the researcher console, you can click publish, and you might not see this button. If you don't see the publish for immediate distribution button, it's because we have to give you access to it on our server. So just reach out to one of our team over email, and we can add that to you quite easily. Does anyone have any questions?
So I did want to address, we had a question from Angela regarding whether there's audio in the simulation. And this was actually a debate that Misha and I had for quite some time. And we ultimately decided not to have audio to maximize the flexibility of the simulation, because we wanted to be able to, again, sort of make the gender of the actors fluid if people wanted to make male or female. And then we also wanted to even make it such that this simulation could be delivered in a different language. So you could produce all the script in Spanish and produce the simulation in Spanish. So we—
And just to add that the conversations, like the mouth movements, match the text. So there are visemes that are programmed for the mouth shapes that will conform to whatever the text is.
Yeah. So it is a feature we're open to adding at some point, but for right now, again, to maximize the flexibility of the simulation, we decided it would be easier to not include audio at this time. But again, if there's a big push to have audio added, then that's definitely something we'd be interested to know. This, again, was one of the reasons we wanted to have this event, was so that we could open up this simulation to get more feedback from researchers who are interested in using it, and to get more information regarding features that you would like to see added at some point in time. All right, so Misha, sorry, really quick before you jump in, I did want to just talk a little bit more about some of the additional assets that are available. So, oh, Michael, were you not finished? Did you want to share one other thing?
No, actually, I think we covered it.
Okay, excellent.
I have a question for Michael real fast before he goes.
Yeah.
And I put it in the chat, and it probably
yeah.
reflects my lack of understanding. I think for me, once you kind of got to the simulation and came back, it helped me understand a little bit better. But the stuff, once you get kicked over to the Plead Justice site where it's in the browser, are you putting that in at the top of Qualtrics, or was that part of the branch feature that you were kind of tagging on at the end of those statements? Could you?
Yeah, that was part of the branch feature. So this isn't something that the researcher or the participant does. Basically, you in Qualtrics, and actually I'll pull it up again so that you can get a maybe clearer idea. I'll go to Edit Survey. You're in the survey flow, and you have your embedded data variables. And before you send them to the simulation, you scroll down here and you click. You might assign. So for instance, here we've assigned the experimental condition to a random number between a 1 or 2. And if you'll notice, I have 2 experimental conditions in this example scenario, 1 and 2.
Right.
We assign some other things, and then we can insert these embedded data variables into any string in Qualtrics, any text. And so in our case, we're going to go to Customize, and we can use this feature of Qualtrics to insert into the URL of the simulation. So here at the beginning, we have pleadjustice.org, permanent simulation. And we just add to the end each of the variables that we want separated by an ampersand. So we have condition equals the Qualtrics code for condition. Name equals the Qualtrics code for name. Once the participant's in the survey will send them to the simulation. It'll do all of this manipulating the URL in the background. And all of this data will end up saved on Qualtrics. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I think maybe you have to do both of the things I was asking. You have to set it as embedded data up top, and then it copies, then you have to take it and add it to the string down below, or am I wrong?
Yeah, you do have to add it up top. So the
Okay,
reason you add it up top is that to get things out of the URL, the way Qualtrics works is to get things out of the URL like that, it needs you to just declare the variables up near the top, and then you can use them later near the bottom, wherever you want.
Gotcha.
Speaking of this, this reminds me that I should note, because people are viewing the survey multiple times, they're going to be there at least twice, at the beginning and at the end. You'll end up with 2 rows in your data file for each person. If you need help merging that, we do have scripts for R and Python available on our website. So you can just download those, run those on your data, and it'll spit out the consolidated version of your data file.
Cool, thank
But
you.
that's the documentation under Data Cleaner on the Plea Justice site. So yes, we have data cleaners you can download that will do this for you. So you're not having to manually merge the 2 rows of each participant's data. So again, we've tried to make this as painless as possible. That said, I do know that a lot of what Michael just went over is not super intuitive. So I just want to urge you to, in addition to knowing that there is documentation available on the Plea Justice webpage, please know that we are also here to help you. We're very eager to get other researchers using these tools. So if you get stuck at some point, you're looking at the documentation, you're just not sure where to go next, absolutely, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to try and help you. Okay, so now that you've learned how to create your own study via the scenario and connect it with the survey, I do want to briefly talk about the flexibility of this simulation with regard to actually being able to add new features or create your own assets. So of course, we have a number of assets that we've shared within this tool, but we're also eager for other researchers to potentially come up with their own assets. So to hire their own animators to come up with assets, and Misha's going to talk to you a little bit more about how you could potentially do that. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to share some of the assets that we're currently developing. So as you might have noticed, currently the simulation uses 2 different crime scenarios. We have a hit and run scenario and a theft scenario. And we started with those 2 because we felt like, well, for a couple of reasons. One, they're relatively common crimes. And the other is we felt like these are crimes that the average person might be able to more easily imagine themselves committing, right? It's definitely more easy living in the New England area for someone, even a very, very good human being, to imagine hitting another vehicle. Pretty sure it happens every single second in New England. So that was the first scenario we came up with. And then we also added the theft scenario. But now to sort of further increase the research questions we can answer with the simulation, I also decided it would be nice to add a drug possession scenario, because of course, as we all know, a number of mandatory minimum penalties really start to kick in when we're talking about drug-related crimes. So I did want to give you a preview of this third scenario that we're hoping to add very shortly. This is a drug possession scenario that I'm hoping will be ready to add within the next couple months. So just to give you a little video preview of what this looks like. Is it going to let me give you a video preview? What's going on? There we go. Here we go. So you'll notice the very creepy green figure. That's because, of course, that's the customizable participant's avatar. But here you're going to see the sequence where they're at a party. A friend of the avatars gets some drugs. They give the avatar their purse to hold on to in the car. And then police show up. They break up the party. The person runs their car. They're trying to find their friend. They're texting them, "Where are you?" Police officer stops by the car. And of course, by laws of visibility, they don't have a warrant, but they notice in plain sight the person has the purse sitting on the car seat and sees some drugs have fallen out of the purse. So they get caught in possession of these drugs. So this is the scenario that we're currently working on. Again, our interest with this scenario is now we can also start examining the impact of mandatory minimum sentences on plea decision making. But with that, I'll kick it to Misha to talk a little bit more about how you could potentially go about hiring an animator to create new assets to add, and then to share them with the plea community that are using this simulation.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I don't have a long presentation for you. I just have want to tell you that here at UMass Lowell, we really work to nurture interdisciplinary collaboration in order to enable a community in which creativity can really flourish. And in fact, our first 2 students who came, who worked on the project, one was from computer science and the other one was from my department, the art and design department. And they actually ended up getting married. So we continue to work with many very creative students across the university and beyond. Of course, Michael Pascal here being a prime example. Just a couple of others though. Another student, Matthew LeBlanc, is working for Cerner, who's been working at the intersection of healthcare and information technology, including predictive models for COVID. And the animators, we have a lot of great animators. Katie Lucas, for example, is now working on the Rick and Morty TV show, which you might have heard of. This shared assets library that you've already seen, it enables a community among the people using the simulation. They can share assets. And we've actually hired our students to create these. So in our case, they have really excellent drawing and animation skills, and they're using software such as Adobe Animate, which is part of the Creative Suite. It's a 2D animation timeline-based program, and it can export standards-based cross-platform JavaScript animations that work in browser. And then people can go ahead and take this and upload the asset to their library. And when they do so, this is a clip, they can actually toggle the public toggle to make it public. And when they do so, the asset will appear in their library, but also in the shared assets library in here. So other people can use it for their experiments. They can copy it over to their accounts. They can hire our students to make new assets. They can hire their own students. So, and like the rest of our work, the animations are available in open source form via GitHub as well. But yeah, if hire artists, they're very useful.
Definitely. Yes, I also just want to mention briefly this this important point got brought up within our team. So one of the Qualtrics settings that you definitely need to make sure to disable when you integrate a survey with the simulation is the prevent ballot box stuffing option. Because again, as Michael said it, they're going to be redirected to the survey a couple of times after the simulation. So if you have that checked, then essentially they're going to get an error when they're supposed to go back to the survey after doing the simulation. So you want to make sure that box is not checked when you do a simulation survey. All right, so before we adjourn, I do just want to make one more mention of sort of a new extension to this simulation. So last summer, we actually worked with a new team of programmers, though Michael was still heavily involved, free of charge, because he's an amazing human being, in creating an educational tool. So essentially, this educational tool utilizes the same simulation assets, so the same dynamic characters, the same backgrounds, but uses these tools to educate people on the legal process. So essentially, we've designed a number of modules that essentially cover different legal topics, and we'll be disseminating this tool free of charge to defense attorneys so they can share it with their clients, particularly juvenile clients, to help to ensure that they're actually making plea decisions knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily, which of course we're all aware is a requirement that is dubiously met with the vast majority of guilty pleas. So we're working on development of that tool. If you're interested in checking out a beta version of it, you can go to education.pleajustice.org. So again, the researcher console is available at researcher.pleajustice.org. And then on the education side, we have education.pleajustice.org to view a demo of the educational tool that we've developed. All right, so thank you all for your time. Before we leave, does anyone else have any other questions or comments that they'd like to get addressed at this point? At this point, you can feel free to just talk.
There looks like there's a question. I don't want to
Yeah.
prevent any future questions, but I just want to thank you, Miko, for your time, and Misha and Michael. It's incredible. I think we've all benefited a lot. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, so yes, we have a great question from Cindy asking whether there'd be a way to use the simulation in a clinical situation. So I do think that could absolutely be an application of the educational tool. So I should have also mentioned one of the elements of the educational tool is that after each of these modules, the participants asked questions within the modules. And then at the conclusion of completing all the modules that were relevant to them, so maybe they have a module on direct consequences of a misdemeanor conviction, collateral consequences of misdemeanor conviction, what the plea process is like, what the trial process is like. Those are 4 different modules. They each have embedded questions in them. And then in addition, after they've completed all the modules, they'll get sort of a final test. We're not calling it a test because the defense attorneys that we consulted with were very strict on, you can't call them tests or exams because that'll freak them out. So we're coming up with more innocuous terms for them, but they get essentially a final test. And that shows how much did they actually pick up from the modules. And I definitely think that, you know, an attorney could see that they're scoring really low on these modules, even after taking them. They could administer them multiple times. They could say, please take these a couple of times. And if they see that they're just coming back and they're constantly not understanding and they're not doing well on these tests, then I absolutely think that would be evidence that there's a competency issue. Great question. Any other questions or comments? Yes, so the recording of this meeting will be accessible. So I was asked to add it to the APLS drive, and then we'll also find a way to add it to the Plea Justice webpage. All right. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. Again, I know Friday afternoons are very valuable to all of us. So really appreciate all of you taking the time. And yeah, I hope that this got you excited about using this. And again, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you think of, that you encounter, any suggestions. We're very interested in people's suggestions on how to improve this and make it more accessible to you. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much.